solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of law the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Have a seat and then go ahead and switch up close to that microphone and speak in.
My name is Christina Servideo, Servidio.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Ms. Servideo, can you tell us where you currently work?
Yes, I'm employed at DNA Labs International, which is a private DNA testing laboratory in Deerfield Beach, Florida.
How long have you worked there?
Over 7 years.
What is your job at DNA Labs International?
I'm a senior DNA analyst as well as the technical leader at DNA Labs International.
Let's start with some background on your education and how you got into DNA.
I have a bachelor's and a master's degree from the Catholic University of America in biomedical engineering. I also have a master's of science degree in forensic molecular biology from the George Washington University.
And was there some additional training you received to become a DNA analyst and a technical leader?
Yes, when you enter any DNA laboratory, you have to go through a training program before you are qualified to do any analysis on casework. That training program includes reading journal articles, doing supervised casework, taking exams, and things like that.
Do you participate in continuing training each year?
Yes, I do.
What does that consist of?
That consists of attending conferences, reading journal articles, and going to different trainings.
Are there, do you belong to any professional organizations?
I do.
Which ones?
The American Academy of Forensic Science, and I'm also licensed by the Texas Forensic Science Commission.
Have you yourself given presentations or conducted training related to DNA work?
Yes, I have.
Have you been qualified as an expert before?
I have.
How many times?
About 25 to 30 times.
Regarding DNA Labs International, is that an accredited DNA lab?
Yes, it is.
Who is the accrediting body for that lab?
ANAB, they are a national accreditation board, and they come in and audit our laboratory. And what that means is they look at everything we do in our laboratory, and they make sure it meets the standards that are set forth by different organizations.
And how many different types of testing does DNA Labs International perform?
Many different types.
For each different type of test, are there specific ways that those tests are validated within your lab?
Yes.
How so?
Whenever we get any kind of new technology at our laboratory, we have to do something that's known as validation. And what that means is we test different samples using that technology to find out what the limitations of that technology are. That has to be completed and reviewed before we're able to use that technology on casework.
And for the analysts that are utilizing the technology, do they also receive training where they can come online and use that technology?
Correct. They receive training as well as a competency exam, which has a known answer to the test or the reviewer. And at the end, they must get that correct answer prior to being signed off or approved to perform casework.
Were you assisted to, were you contacted to assist the state with the Victoria Martens murder?
Yes.
And how did you determine a testing plan or what should be tested in this case since there was already some DNA testing going on?
We reviewed the previous test reports that had been done by the New Mexico laboratory to see what additional testing the samples for this case would be eligible for.
And what types of items were tested in your lab?
We tested DNA extracts, which are tubes containing liquid that have the DNA in them. We also tested physical items of evidence as well, and standards from known individuals.
So we heard a little bit about what extracts were yesterday, and then you've given us a little bit more today, but how do you know if that tube, if that extract is worth testing?
So part of the DNA process is to look at how much DNA is present. We call it quantification. And that's something that happens during the DNA processing, and we can look at how much human DNA is present as well as how much male DNA is present. Based on those quantities, we can determine what kind of additional testing we would be able to do.
So you said that it comes in a tube, so how do you perform a test on what's in this tube?
So the tubes come to our laboratory. Usually they come to us dried down. That just means that all the liquid has been taken out and all the DNA is at the bottom of the tube. It's dry. You would add liquid back to that. It's called resuspending it. And at that point, now the DNA is back in liquid, which you can put into a reaction in the laboratory.
When you test an extract, does it always give you the same result as the original test that was done on that item?
Not necessarily. It can depend on how old the extract is, for example. If the extract was tested, years prior, there's a chance that the DNA could have degraded during that time.
Tell us what an extract blank is.
So as part of our quality procedures in any forensic laboratory, while you're processing the evidence samples, you also have to process something that's known as an extraction blank or reagent blank. What that is any chemicals or anything that is done to the sample also needs to be done to that reagent blank, so it mimics what's happening with the evidence sample. At the end of processing, you want to get no DNA profile in that to show that there was no contamination or nothing occurred during the DNA processing steps.
So it's a control, more or less?
Yes, exactly.
Can you explain how you screen a piece of physical evidence for DNA?
We sterilize our bench area first, where we're going to analyze that item. By sterilize, we use a combination of bleach and alcohol to ensure that there is no DNA from anything else on that bench. We will then lay down a piece of what we call bench paper, so that way we're not having the item directly contact the bench itself. At that point, we will open the evidence item, examine it, note any stains that are present, and conduct any serology tests if necessary.
Tell us what serology is.
Serology is analyzing a piece of evidence for body fluids, such as blood, semen, or saliva.
Are there presumptive tests to show you if those things might be there?
Yes.
And do you use those in your screening?
We do.
And once you have an area of interest, or you think you've found something you want to test, what types of tests are there available to you?
Once we test for semen or saliva or blood, we take what's called a cutting or a sampling of the item for DNA analysis. Once we are processing something for DNA analysis, we are going to extract the DNA, and we are going to decide at that point, once we see the quantity of DNA, how that sample should be forwarded.
And going to this case, our analyst yesterday from the state lab explained the types of kits or tests that she was able to use, but your lab has some different testing kits. Can you explain what, in this case, which kits or tests that you used?
We used the Global Filer kit, the PowerPlex Fusion 6C kit, and the PowerPlex Y23 kit.
Did you use any other technology or software in this case?
We did. We used a statistical tool known as StarMix that helps to interpret complex DNA mixtures.
Now, why did you use 3 different types of tests here?
So for the Global Filer and the Fusion 6C kit, both of those kits are what is known as autosomal kits. That basically means they look at human DNA. So whether you are a male or a female, it would analyze DNA from both types of individuals. The PowerPlex Y23 kit, on the other hand, just looks at male DNA. So it would be able to, in essence, eliminate any female DNA because you would not see it, because females do not have a Y chromosome. All these kits were used because they are newer kits, they are more sensitive kits than some of the previous kits that were online.
So were you looking for the potential for an expanded set of results?
Yes.
Did you find mixtures of DNA in your analysis in this case?
We did.
What is a mixture?
A mixture is when you have DNA from multiple people in one sample.
And does DNA, well, can DNA be destroyed or degraded?
It can.
How does that happen?
Time, DNA will degrade over time. Chemicals are also something that can cause DNA to degrade. There's a reason why we do use bleach in our laboratory to help to sterilize our benches. So anything like bleach or detergents can help to destroy DNA as well. Heat would be another factor. So if something was left and exposed to a high amount of heat, that could destroy the DNA.
Can DNA be obscured by other DNA? Can you give us an example?
Yes, it can. So the best example would be in a sexual assault kit. If you tested a vaginal swab, that comes directly from a person's body. It's what we call an intimate swab in our field. And you expect there to be a lot of female DNA because it's coming directly from her. So in that particular case, there could be the potential to mask DNA from other individuals just due to the overwhelming amount of DNA from that person.
Can you tell us a little bit about genealogy? I've heard a lot about that. What is that?
Genealogy is a newer technology in the field. Its purpose is to provide investigative leads when we have an unknown profile. It's commonly used for single source samples. It can be used for mixtures, but it has to meet certain requirements for that. For example, a lot of samples where autosomal DNA testing is not an option because of the limited amount of male DNA, for example, Like we talked about before, masking DNA and having too much female DNA, that would be an example where genealogy would not be a good option, because if you processed it for genealogy, you would only pick up that female DNA.
What about with a Y profile? Would that be a good thing to try for genealogy?
Not necessarily, because Y profiles are not unique to the individual. So if you process that same sample in autosomal looking at human and male DNA, it could be a mixture of several different individuals.
We learned a lot yesterday about autosomal testing and Y testing, but we've talked about something called star mix today. Tell us more about that. How does that work, and what's it for?
That's a statistical tool in our lab. We use it for complex mixtures. What star mix does is it takes a complex mixture and it breaks it down and looks at what all the possible DNA types are for each contributor in that mixture. Once it does that, then that mixture can be compared to any reference standards that are provided. At that point, a statistic known as a likelihood is generated, and what a likelihood ratio does is compares two different scenarios and provides support for one scenario over another.
What other labs or use star mix?
Over 50 labs in the country have star mix online or in the process of validating it. The FBI is one of those laboratories, as well as the Army laboratory. Our laboratory was the 5th lab in the country to bring online star mix.
And is that internationally used as well?
It is. It is used in Europe and Australia, as well as New Zealand.
So this is a newer technology, but has star mix been accepted in the scientific community?
It has, and it's been in use in the United States since 2015.
And we already talked about this a little bit, but star mix was validated within your lab?
It was.
And is it validated in all the other accredited labs that it's used in?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this point, I would move to qualify Mr. Video as an expert in the forensic science of serology and DNA analysis.
No objection.
She'll be permitted to testify in that capacity. Let's talk a little bit about the work that you did in this case. How many extracts of those little tubes, and let me back up a little bit. Well, no, I think we got it. So how many extracts did you test in this case?
I believe there were about 20 extracts that we tested.
And what about physical things, items?
Oh, excuse me, sorry. I believe the extracts were about 20 to 30, and same with the physical items. I believe the physical items were about 20.
And how did you, since you're in Florida, how did you receive all of these items?
We received the items through FedEx.
And were all the items sealed when you received them?
Yes, they were.
And were they in brown paper or plastic bags with the labels and seals and signatures all intact?
Correct.
Did you discover anything compromised about what was received?
Not that we noted.
And you talked a little bit about the protocols, but all of those were followed in this case?
Yes, they were.
Proper protective gear was worn when these samples were analyzed?
Yes.
For items?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And once you tested items, do you write reports?
I do.
Were your reports reviewed?
Yes, all of our reports go through what's known as a technical review process. That's when another analyst who is qualified in all the same technologies that I am reviews the report in the case file for accuracy and to make sure that all the findings are correct. Once that happens, we have a second technical review. So an additional analyst will also analyze the report, analyze the case file, and also confirm those results. Following that, we also have an administrative review, where a member of our admin staff will come in and they will look for any clerical errors like spelling and grammar.
How many reports did you prepare in this case?
4 reports.
And once you finished testing everything, how did you get those items of evidence back to New Mexico?
We packaged all of them up and sealed them in a box and sent them back using FedEx, the same method that they were shipped to us in.
Is that a normal practice, shipping evidence through FedEx?
Yes, that's normal for our laboratory. Most of our agencies that we deal with submit evidence in that way.
And you talked about some known standards. Did you receive standards from Michelle Martens, Fabian Gonzales, Jessica Kelley, and Victoria Martens, or were you able to produce standards?
Yes, we were.
So you produced your own standards?
Yes, that's correct.
Let's move to the actual items that you tested. So let's start with some items relating to Victoria's autopsy. Looking at, I see an extract from her mid-back, which I believe is from your March 12, 2018 report.
May I reference my reports?
Yes, that's fine, thank you. And if you need your lab number, I have those.
Would you mind providing that number?
Sure, it's 17-10417.26.
Okay.
And so, just so we're clear, you gave all these items another number that's unique to your lab, right?
That's correct.
So if we look at that number, that extract from the back, that references 4175-24. Is that what you have?
Correct.
So that's an extract in a tube. So tell us what type of testing you did and what result you got from that extract.
For this extract, we performed YSTR testing, so the testing that just looks at the male DNA. The Y-DNA profile that we obtained from that item indicated a mixture of at least 2 male individuals, but was inconclusive for comparison purposes.
Okay, let's look also, I believe, the same report, the extract from the lower back, which I have is 18.01781.02.
Okay.
And tell us about, and that references 4175-14. Is that what you have?
Yes.
Tell us what result and what test you did on that.
We also performed the YSTR test on this item. The Y-DNA profile obtained from this item also indicated a mixture of at least 2 male individuals and was inconclusive for comparison purposes.
So now, I know that you weren't privy to all of the lab results from the lab that we heard yesterday from the state lab, that is. But we heard yesterday as to 4175-14 that the state lab here got a comparable Y from there, and you're getting a mixture that's not comparable, insufficient. How do we explain the discrepancy between the two tests?
So that can happen when you use a more sensitive kit. You might pick up DNA from more low-level individuals that you didn't see in one of the older kits that was used.
And what about her getting, or the Ms. Archuleta getting a comparable profile and you getting inconclusive? Does that have anything to do with it being an extract, or?
That just has to do, I believe that has more so to do with the quality of the kit that we used. So because it can pick up all those low level of DNA, I believe that's probably why we're seeing a mixture now, whereas before it was only a single source profile was seen.
So this isn't an uncommon thing to have when one lab's using one set of tests and you're using maybe a little bit more sensitive to have sort of a different results.
Correct. We see in our laboratory, because we are a private laboratory and we do have newer kits online, when we do retest extracts from other laboratories, which we do regularly, we do sometimes see different results because of an older kit being used. It's not as sensitive as our kits are in our laboratory.
Does that invalidate the results from the state lab at all?
No, I wouldn't say it invalidates it. It's just a different test.
Let's move to the extract from the lower back, which I believe is the same report on March 12th of 18. That extract number is 18.0178 or 18.01781.01, which I believe corresponds to 4175.11.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
The Y-DNA profile that we obtained from that item indicated a mixture of at least 4 male individuals and was inconclusive for comparison purposes.
Let's talk about the left-hand swabs, which is going to be January 17th, 2018 report. And this is her OMI swabs. This is 17.10559.06 and 07. So my understanding is she had a dry and a wet swab of her hand taken. Tell us what you did with those swabs.
So we combined those 2 swabs into one DNA sample. That's not uncommon to do. A lot of swabs are collected in the field with both a wet swab to try to get up as much DNA as possible, and then a dry swab to collect any remaining DNA. So because they come from the same area, though, they can be combined later in processing.
What result did you get, and what test did you do?
So blood was indicated on those swabs. The items were combined into that single sample for DNA analysis, and an insufficient amount of male DNA was detected on that sample. What that means is those different kits that I was telling you about, we need to have a certain amount of DNA, male DNA, in order to take them forward to try to get a profile. Anything that's below that limit, we know it's very unlikely that we would get a comparable DNA profile, so we don't do any further testing. So that's what happened in this particular case with this sample.
Now, we talked a little bit about that yesterday with Ms. Archuleta about you're still going to see some DNA there, and maybe still get the graph, right? So can't you just compare some of the pieces that you see that look like they might be good, or what's the reasoning there?
So for this was just insufficient overall. Now, if you had processed it, we were just looking for male in this case. So if you had processed it, you may have determined a female DNA profile. Victoria, these did come directly from her. But because the male was not enough, that's why we didn't take it forward. So yes, if you had amplified that, you would have gotten the graph, or the electropherogram is what we call it. But because there was not enough male DNA, that's why we did not proceed.
If you had gone forward and gotten that graph, is there a time when that's still insufficient to compare?
Correct. Actually, the previous results we were discussing, when I said inconclusive for comparison results, comparison purposes, that means that generally there's either not enough information, or there's too much information, there's too many people, or it's too complex for us to do any further analysis. We determine that before any comparisons are made. So when I say it's inconclusive for comparison purposes, I determined that looking at the evidence, and no comparisons can be made to anyone.
What's the danger of comparing something like that?
That's something that's not done in our field. We have strict guidelines that say that it shouldn't be done. The reason why is we would never want to introduce any kind of bias into our analysis. So we always analyze the evidence profile first, make any kind of determinations we can prior to that comparison if the sample is deemed suitable for comparison.
And what do you mean by bias?
We wouldn't want to later on say, oh, well, I kind of see the suspect could be here, so now I think it's suitable for comparison. We want to determine that ahead of time, and then if it's inconclusive, we know, okay, we can't look at it. It's not suitable.
Let's move to, I believe we left off on left-hand swabs, so right-hand swabs, which is also January 17th, and that's 17-10559.04 and 05. So again, was this a combination of the wet and dry?
Yes, it was.
And tell us about your results.
Blood was indicated on both of those sets of swabs. We did combine those items into a single sample for DNA analysis. The sample did have sufficient Y DNA to move forward, and the Y DNA profile that was obtained from the sample indicates a mixture of at least 2 male individuals and is inconclusive for comparison purposes.
So you cannot compare that to any known program?
Correct.
Let's talk about the right hand fingernails, which I believe are on the November 6th of 2017 report, 17.10417.07.
Okay.
Did you do testing on the, I believe you had the extract here?
Yes, we did.
Tell us about your test results.
The Y DNA profile obtained from that item indicated at least 1 male contributor and was inconclusive for comparison purposes.
Moving to Victoria's, the chest swabs, which are 17-10417.23 from the November 6th report. Was this also an extract?
Yes, it was.
And what results did you get from this extract?
The Y DNA profile we obtained from that extract indicated a mixture of at least 2 male contributors and is inconclusive for comparison purposes.
Let's move to her abdomen, which is 17.10417.10, which I believe corresponds to 4175-6.
Yes.
Tell us about this result from this extract.
The Y DNA profile obtained from that extract indicated at least 1 male contributor and was inconclusive for comparison purposes.
There was also a swab, or an extract from the swab of her left thigh, which I believe is on the January 17, 2018 report, and that is DNA lab number 17.10559.08.
Okay.
And tell us about the test or the results from that extract.
Blood was indicated on that item. However, an insufficient amount of male DNA was detected, so no further analysis was performed.
There was also a garbage bag that was wrapped around her body, and you had an extract from that, which I believe is from the March 12, 2017 report, I believe. And that was DNA lab number 17-10417.14.
Yes, I believe that was in the November 6, 2017.
November? Sorry.
Yes. No, you're fine. The Y DNA profile obtained from that item indicated at least 1 male contributor and was inconclusive for comparison purposes.
Moving to some of the items that you tested from the scene, and let me back up a little bit. You received a lot of items in this case, and we're just sort of condensing down to some of the results. Is that fair? So
yes.
You did more testing than we're talking about today.
Yes.
So moving to the items from the scene, there was I believe it's labeled a Disney comforter, and this was we started in November 6, 2017, and this you actually had the comforter. Is that right?
That's correct.
And so tell us about how you process this actual item instead of an extract, and what results you got.
So for this item, we opened it on our bench like we were talking about earlier, and we collected 2 different samples from this item. So one was a stain on the side that had the fairy design on it, is what we called it, and one was collected from a stain on the floral side, so there were 2 sides to this comforter. For the stain on the fairy side, an insufficient amount of male DNA was detected on that sample, so we did not process that any further. And for the stain on the floral side, we did obtain enough male DNA to do YSTR testing, and the Y DNA profile indicated at least 3 males contributors and is inconclusive for comparison purposes.
Was there an additional test in January of 2018 on the floral side again?
There was. An additional sample was collected from a possible blood stain on the floral side. For that particular sample, an insufficient amount of male DNA was also detected on the sample, so no further analysis was performed.
And this is DNA lab number 17-10574.02, which corresponds to 1832. Is that what you have?
I think for the Disney Comforter, I have 17-10574.01.
You also physically had some knives.
Correct.
And let's start, may I approach? I'm going to show you what's been marked for identification at States 323. Do you recognize that photo?
I do.
What is that photo?
That is a photo of a knife that was processed at our laboratory. We had designated it 17-10577.
And did it have some markings on it from a previous lab's testing?
Yes, it did.
And was that marking 1834F?
Yes.
Your Honor, this given the permission of what's been marked for identification at States 323.
No objection.
323 will be admitted. May I publish? You may. I'm going to put this up. It should be on the screen right next to you. So this is one. So did you receive a bunch of knives in this case?
We did.
And did you process lots of knives, all of the knives?
We did examine them all.
And I'm saying process. Examine is my better word. So you examined all the knives, and there were two of interest.
Correct.
This is one of them, right?
Yes.
Tell us about what you did to this knife and what results you got.
So for the first report, we did test the knife for blood, and no blood was detected on that item. We sampled an area of the blade of the knife, and the partial DNA profile that we obtained from the blade indicated one female contributor and matched the DNA profile from Victoria Martens. So once we get a match like that, we need to associate a statistic with that. So in this particular case, the chance that an unrelated person chosen at random from the general population would match this partial DNA profile is approximately 1 in every 21 quintillion individuals. We were also able to exclude Fabian Gonzales, Michelle Martens, and Jessica Kelley from that partial DNA profile.
Can you tell us about the second sample, which I think was January of 2018?
An additional sample was later collected from the handle area of that knife. No blood was detected on that sample, and the DNA profile we obtained indicated at least one male contributor, but was inconclusive for comparison purposes.
When you say at least one male, does that mean there's two?
Could be. Because this was an autosomal DNA profile, there is a location, it's called a sex determining location, that looks for just whether there's an X or a Y in the profile or both. In this particular case, there would have been a Y in that DNA profile. So that tells us we know there's one male, at least.
So it could be one or more.
Could be.
And then tell us about the second knife that you processed. I have that from your January 2018 report as 17-10577.02 or 1834A.
For that knife, blood was indicated on the blade of that knife, and a sample was collected from the entire handle area. For that DNA profile, we obtained the DNA profile indicated a mixture of at least two individuals with at least one male contributor. Fabian Gonzales, Michelle Martens, and Jessica Kelley were all excluded from that DNA profile from the handle area. Victoria Martens could not be excluded, however, as a contributor to the mixed DNA profile, so we used our statistical tool known as StarMix to generate a likelihood ratio. The DNA profile we obtained from that sample is approximately 24 quadrillion times more probable if the sample originated from Victoria Martens and one unknown person than if it originated from two unknown persons. This analysis has extremely strong support for the proposition that Victoria Martens is a contributor to the mixed DNA profile.
Going back to an item from the Office of the Medical Examiner, there was a shirt with Victoria's body or on Victoria's body that I have listed as your number 17.10576, which I believe is from the original report is November of 17, and then again in January of 2018.
So for the original testing, blood was indicated on that shirt. A sample was collected from the upper area of the shirt, avoiding possible blood stains of the sample, or of the item, excuse me.
Why did you do that?
We do that in order to try to see what other DNA is there on that item other than blood. So blood or body fluids tend to overwhelm the sample. If you think back to the vaginal swab example I gave, where if you have so much DNA from that one person, it might overwhelm any other DNA you have on that item. The same can happen for blood. We know that blood typically has a good deal of DNA in it. So that's why we were avoiding the bloody areas. We didn't want to pick up the DNA profile from the blood. We wanted to see what other DNA was on that particular item. Although we avoided the possible blood stains, blood was still indicated on the sample that we collected. The DNA profile from that sample indicated one female contributor and matched the DNA profile obtained from Victoria Martens. Fabian Gonzales, Michelle Martens, and Jessica Kelley were all excluded, and the chance that an unrelated person chosen at random from the general population would match that DNA profile is approximately 1 in every 350 septillion individuals.
So basically it's Victoria's own DNA on that shirt.
At that high of a number, that's generally what we would say.
And tell us about the testing you went forward on in January 2018 on the same item.
So that same extract that we processed originally, we also tested it in YSTRs because we had already known that we'd gotten Victoria's profile, so we wanted to see what other Y DNA we could get from that particular item. The Y DNA profile obtained from that sample indicated a mixture of at least 4 male individuals and was inconclusive for comparison purposes.
Let's talk about some clothing taken from Jessica Kelley, which I think originally was tested in November of 2017, and then again in January of 2018. And that's a blue tank top labeled 17.10560.01.
Blood was indicated on that item. The DNA profile obtained from the possible blood stains on that item indicated one female contributor and matched the DNA profile from Michelle Martens. Victoria Martens, Fabian Gonzales, and Jessica Kelley are excluded as contributors to this DNA profile. The chance that an unrelated person chosen at random for the general population would match that DNA profile is approximately 1 in every 1.5 octillion individuals.
And tell us about your additional sample from January of 2018, those reports in January 2018.
We collected an additional sample from the possible blood stains on the exterior front bottom of the item, and blood was indicated on that sample. The DNA profile we obtained from that sample indicated a mixture of at least 2 individuals. Fabian Gonzales and Jessica Kelley were excluded as contributors to that mixed DNA profile. Michelle and Victoria Martens could not be ruled out as contributors to that mixed DNA profile. So we used our statistical software, StarMix. In comparison to Victoria, the DNA profile from the sample is approximately 220 trillion times more probable if the sample originated from Victoria Martens and one unknown person than if it originated from 2 unknown persons. Therefore, this analysis provides extremely strong support for the proposition that Victoria is a contributor to this mixed DNA profile.
You also had an extract, I think, from a pair of jeans from Jessica Kelley that was tested.
I had another comparison to Michelle. In that.
Okay. I'm sorry.
No.
Stopped you too soon.
We also compared to Michelle for that particular sample. And the DNA profile obtained from the sample is approximately 180 trillion times more probable if the sample originated from Michelle Martens and 1 unknown person than if it originated from 2 unknown persons. Therefore, this analysis provides extremely strong support for the proposition that Michelle is a contributor to this mixed DNA profile.
Is that everything from that one?
And then one further set of propositions was considered. The DNA profile obtained from the sample is approximately 1.1 duodecillion times more probable if the sample originated from Victoria and Michelle than if it originated from 2 unknown and unrelated persons. Therefore, the analysis provides extremely strong support that, for the proposition that Victoria and Michelle are contributors to this mixed DNA profile.
When you're talking about propositions, how do you determine which propositions to ask the software to consider?
So we determine propositions based on information we have at the time. So if someone's excluded, we don't need to run them in our StarMix program. We can outright exclude them. However, if we do see consistencies between their profiles and the mixture, that's when we would need to run it in StarMix to generate that likelihood ratio. Additional propositions can always be requested later if new information becomes available or if it's requested.
Let's move to Jessica Kelley's jeans, which were, I believe you had an extract on 17.10417.03, which is 1855F. And
Yes.
tell us about that extract. What results did you get from that?
The DNA profile from that item indicated a mixture of at least 2 individuals contributing to a major female and a minor DNA profile. When we say the word major, we mean the majority of the DNA comes from that particular individual. The major DNA profile matched the DNA profile obtained from Michelle Martens, and the chance that an unrelated person chosen at random from the general population would match that major DNA profile is approximately 1 in every 1.5 octillion individuals. We were able to exclude Fabian Gonzales and Jessica Kelley from the mixed DNA profile. So they were excluded as contributors to the mixed DNA profile, which includes both the major and the minor DNA profile. Victoria Martens could not be ruled out, though, as a possible contributor to this mixed DNA profile. So we reanalyzed using the StarMix software. The DNA profile obtained from the item was 41 billion times more probable if the sample originated from Victoria and Michelle Martens than if it originated from Michelle and one unknown person. Therefore, this analysis provides extremely strong support for the proposition that Victoria is a contributor to this mixed DNA profile.
The next item that I would like to chat about is you had physically a wipes container, straight wipes container, which I believe is 17.10417.19, which corresponds to 2674B from our numbers here.
This was the hand wipes container?
Yes, and that should be on November 6th to start. I'm sorry, November 6th looks like an extract. And then I think January looks the actual item.
Can you repeat the item number?
Absolutely. 17.10417.19.
Thank you.
So we had an extract from the Santa Fe lab in November.
Yes, we did process that. The DNA profile we obtained from the item indicated a mixture of at least 2 individuals with at least 1 male contributor and was inconclusive for comparison purposes.
So after that extract was tested, you got the actual container, and I believe those results are contained in the January 2018. And there's a different item number since that was the extract. So the actual wipes container was 17.10555.01 and .02. And tell us how you decided where to look for evidence on this item.
So blood was indicated on that item. So we collected 2 samples. There was a strap on the item, so we tested that particular area to see who may have come into contact with that item. And then we also tested the exterior top lid as well, the lid that you can open to get to the wipes. So we collected 1 from each area.
And what were your results?
For the exterior top lid sample, we did not detect any blood on that sample. And the DNA profile we obtained was a mixture of at least 2 individuals with at least 1 male contributor. Victoria Martens, Fabian Gonzales, Michelle Martens, and Jessica Kelley could not be ruled out as possible contributors to that mixed DNA profile. So we ran 4 sets of propositions, 1 including each of them in the StarMix software. The DNA profile obtained from the sample is approximately 480 billion times more probable if the sample originated from Victoria and 2 unknown persons than if it originated from 3 unknown persons. Therefore, this analysis provides extremely strong support for the proposition that Victoria is a contributor to the mixed DNA profile. Next, we compared to the DNA profile from Fabian Gonzales. The DNA profile that was obtained from that sample is approximately 110,000 times more probable if the sample originated from 3 unknown persons than if it originated from Fabian and 2 unknown persons. Therefore, this analysis provides very strong support for the proposition that Fabian is not a contributor to this mixed DNA profile. Next, we analyzed comparing to Michelle Martens. The DNA profile obtained from the sample is approximately 11 times more probable if the sample originated from Michelle and 2 unknown persons than if it originated from 3 unknown persons. Therefore, this analysis is uninformative in relation to Michelle. It does not give support for either proposition. Lastly, we compared to Jessica Kelley. The DNA profile obtained from the sample is approximately 19,000 times more probable if the sample originated from 3 unknown persons than if it originated from Jessica Kelley and 2 unknown persons. So the analysis provides very strong support for the proposition that Jessica Kelley is not a contributor to this DNA profile.
Okay, and the next, that was the lid, right? So the strap?
For the strap, no blood was detected on that sample, and the DNA profile from the sample indicated a mixture of at least 3 individuals with at least 1 male. Fabian Gonzales and Michelle Martens were excluded as contributors to this mixed DNA profile. Victoria Martens and Jessica Kelley could not be ruled out as possible contributors to the mixed DNA profile. So two sets of propositions were considered. In relation to Victoria, the DNA profile obtained from the sample is approximately 7.1 quadrillion times more probable if the sample originated from Victoria and 2 unknown persons than if it originated from 3 unknown persons. This analysis provides extremely strong support for the proposition that Victoria is a contributor to this mixed DNA profile. When comparing to Jessica Kelley, the DNA profile obtained from the sample is approximately 120 million times more probable if the sample originated from 3 unknown persons than if it originated from Jessica Kelley and 2 unknowns. Therefore, this analysis provides extremely strong support for the proposition that Jessica Kelley is not a contributor to this mixed DNA profile.
Moving on to there were some books also, and if you physically have the books, that is DNA lab number 17.10558.01, and
yes, we did physically have the book for this item.
Okay, so this is the faith-to-faith book. Is that how you have it labeled?
Yes.
Tell us about the results and where you tested this item.
So 2 samples were collected from this item and combined into a single sample for DNA analysis. One was from a possible blood stain on the exterior front cover of the book, and the other was from a possible blood stain on the unbound side of the book. And no blood was detected on these samples that we collected. The DNA profile obtained from that sample was a mixture of at least 2 individuals, and Fabian Gonzales and Michelle Martens were excluded as contributors to that mixed DNA profile. Victoria Martens and Jessica Kelley could not be ruled out as possible contributors to the mixed DNA profile. The DNA profile from the sample is approximately 1.1 quadrillion times more probable if the sample originated from Victoria and 1 unknown than if it originated from 2 unknowns. Therefore, the analysis provides extremely strong support for the proposition that Victoria is a contributor to the mixed DNA profile. The DNA profile obtained from the sample is approximately 50 billion times more probable if the sample originated from Jessica Kelley and 1 unknown than if it originated from 2 unknown individuals. Therefore, this analysis provides extremely strong support for the proposition that Jessica Kelley is a contributor to the mixed DNA profile. We also ran one additional proposition considering both Victoria and Jessica Kelley. The DNA profile obtained from the sample is approximately 310 decillion times more probable if the sample originated from Victoria Martens and Jessica Kelley than if it originated from 2 unknown unrelated persons. Therefore, there is extremely strong support. This analysis provides extremely strong support for the proposition that Victoria Martens and Jessica Kelley are contributors to the DNA profile.
Now, you said no blood was detected, but in your serology phase on your screen, it appears to be blood, and in fact, our New Mexico lab here had a presumption for blood. Can it still be blood even when your test didn't show a presumption for blood or no blood indicated?
Yes, that's possible. With our blood testing, it could be, if you don't have get enough sample, then that could show a blood negative result. And different laboratories use different presumptive tests as well. Presumptive means, basically it stands for preliminary. It's a preliminary test to see if it's blood. So it is possible to get differing results.
Does age or the drying of a sample, can that also contribute to this presumptive test showing?
It can. It is possible to still get a blood positive stain from old stains. We do process cold cases where we have blood stains from the 70s or the 80s and we're still able to get a blood positive result, but it definitely can have an impact. And then same with drying. If it's a dried blood stain, it can be harder to get the blood transferred to the swab as opposed to something like a fresh stain.
Let's talk about the jumpsuit or jumper belonging to Victoria Martens that was found in the kitchen trash can, which is DNA lab number 17.10561.01. And I believe you have the actual item, and that was tested in November of 2017.
That's correct. We collected 2 samples from this particular item. One was from the exterior of each strap, and one was from the exterior bottom outside portion of the jumpsuit.
Why did you choose those 2 locations?
I believe that those were the 2 locations where contact was suspected. For the exterior of each strap, the DNA profile we obtained indicated a mixture of at least 3 individuals contributing to a major female and a minor DNA profile. And there was at least 1 male contributor in the mixed DNA profile. The major DNA profile did match the DNA profile from Victoria Martens, and the chance that an unrelated person chosen at random from the general population would match that major DNA profile is approximately 1 in every 350 septillion individuals. Fabian Gonzales, Michelle Martens, and Jessica Kelley could not be ruled out from the mixed DNA profile. So we ran propositions considering each of them. The DNA profile that we obtained from the sample failed to produce conclusive results when we compared to Fabian Gonzales, when a proposition of 3 overall contributors, including Victoria Martens, was considered. What that means is the software could not consider Fabian as part of that mixture when we were interpreting it as 3 overall contributors. The DNA profile we obtained from the sample, when comparing to Michelle, is approximately 14 billion times more probable if the sample originated from Victoria and 2 unknowns than if it originated from Victoria, Michelle, and 1 unknown. Therefore, the analysis provides extremely strong support for the proposition that Michelle Martens is not a contributor to the mixed DNA profile. Lastly, in relation to Jessica Kelley, the DNA profile obtained from the sample is approximately 67,000 times more probable if the sample originated from Victoria and 2 unknown persons than if it originated from Victoria, Jessica, and 1 unknown person. Therefore, this analysis provides very strong support for the proposition that Jessica Kelley is not a contributor to the mixed DNA profile.
So for the inconclusive, that just means the software just didn't consider him at all, so we don't know anything really.
It means that the software can't explain the mixture as 3 individuals if we are considering it in relation to Fabian Gonzales.
So talk about, was that everything for the strap?
It was.
So those are the exterior bolt straps?
Correct.
And was the idea that someone, if that item were to be taken off, it's described as was it one that connected shorts and top cover? So the idea was that someone would pull those straps down?
Correct.
Okay. And then the next area you focused on was the bottom, and was that the idea that someone would have to then pull the item up?
Correct.
Okay. Tell us about the results from that exterior bottom.
The DNA profile obtained from that sample indicated a mixture of 3 individuals contributing to a major female and a minor DNA profile. There is at least 1 male contributor to the mixed DNA profile. The major DNA profile matched the DNA profile obtained from Victoria Martens. The chance that an unrelated person chosen at random from the general population would match that major DNA profile is approximately 1 in every 350 septillion individuals. Fabian, Michelle, and Jessica could not be ruled out as possible contributors to the mixed DNA profile. When comparing to Fabian Gonzales, the DNA profile obtained from the sample is approximately 36 trillion times more probable if the sample originated from Victoria and 2 unknowns than if it originated from Victoria, Fabian, and 1 unknown. Therefore, the analysis provides extremely strong support for the proposition that Fabian Gonzales is not a contributor to this mixed DNA profile. When compared to Michelle Martens, the DNA profile obtained from the sample failed to produce conclusive results in comparison to Michelle Martens when a proposition of 3 overall contributors, including Victoria, was considered. So similar to the last sample, the software cannot explain the mixture in relation to Michelle Martens. The DNA profile from the sample is approximately 71 times more probable if the sample originated from Victoria and 3 unknown persons than if it originated from Victoria, Michelle, and 2 unknown persons. So we increased, given that Victoria and Michelle are related, sometimes that could make a mixture look like, a smaller number of contributors than it really is. So in that particular case, we did run another proposition looking at 4 contributors, seeing how the mixture would be interpreted as 4 contributors in relation to Michelle specifically. So the DNA profile is 71 times more probable if the sample originated from Victoria and 3 unknown persons than if it originated from Victoria, Michelle, and 2 unknown persons. This analysis provides moderate support that, for the proposition that Michelle is not a contributor to the mixed DNA profile. And lastly, we compared to Jessica Kelley, and the DNA profile obtained from the sample was approximately 10 times more probable if the sample originated from Victoria Martens, Jessica Kelley, and 1 unknown person than if it originated from Victoria and 2 unknown persons. Therefore, there is slight support that Victoria, Jessica Kelley, and 1 unknown person contributed to the mixed DNA profile, rather than Victoria and 2 unknown persons.
So I'm hearing these words, slight and strong and extremely strong, and I'm probably getting them wrong, but how are those sort of determined? What's the meaning behind those? So the purpose of those different levels of support are to kind of equate a verbal scale, is what we like to call it in our field, to a numerical value. So those numbers you keep hearing, 10 times, 71 times, that is your likelihood ratio, but what does that mean as far as support? So that's why the verbal scale was established. Anything over 1 million is extremely strong support, and that's the highest level of support that you can get on our scale. And what about for slight support? Is there a range for that?
There is a range for that. I don't recall at this time, but there is a range for that. And it's on like the lower end. So slight would be the lowest level of support, moderate, very strong, and extremely strong.
And extremely strong is over 1 million.
Over 1 million.
So some of these numbers we've heard are like numbers I can't say. So is that?
Yeah. So anything, that's why those are all extremely strong support. If anything, once it hits 1 million, as far as the likelihood ratio, that would be on the scale as extremely strong support.
Let's talk about one other item of clothing that was found in that trash can. I believe you had the extract. This is the November 2017 report. The Monster High underwear extract. So I have this DNA lab 17.10414.05. Tell us about the results from that extract.
Sorry, can you repeat the number?
Absolutely. 17.10414.05. I think that was from November of 2017.
Okay, yes, we tested that using the YSTR kit. And the Y-DNA profile obtained from that item indicated at least one male contributor and was inconclusive for comparison purposes.
The last item I want to talk about with you is there was some towels received physically that were found inside the washing machine. So I have the towel from washer, the hand towel, as DNA lab 17.13223, which corresponds to 1833A1 from New Mexico.
Yes.
And tell us about the results from that hand towel.
Blood was indicated on the item, and 3 different samples were collected from the towel for DNA analysis. One was from a bloodstain on the top of the towel. One was from a possible bloodstain on the top of the towel. One was from a possible bloodstain on the bottom of the towel. And one was from the top and the bottom of the towel, but was avoiding any stained areas. Similar to the other items we've talked about previously, we wanted to avoid the stained areas to avoid any potential blood masking other DNA contributors. For the first sample, the possible bloodstain on the top of the towel, the DNA profile we obtained from the sample indicated a mixture of at least 3 individuals with at least 1 male contributor. Jessica Kelley was excluded as a contributor to that mixed DNA profile. Victoria, Fabian, and Michelle all could not be ruled out as possible contributors. We considered 3 different sets of propositions for this sample. The DNA profile obtained from the sample is approximately 3.6 quadrillion times more probable if the sample originated from Victoria Martens and 2 unknown persons than if it originated from 3 unknown persons. Therefore, this analysis provides extremely strong support for the proposition that Victoria is a contributor to this mixed DNA profile. The DNA profile obtained from the sample is approximately 44,000 times more probable if the sample originated from Fabian Gonzales and 2 unknown persons than if it originated from 3 unknown persons. Therefore, this analysis provides very strong support for the proposition that Fabian Gonzales is a contributor to this mixed DNA profile. Lastly, the DNA profile obtained from the sample is approximately 680 times more probable if the sample originated from 3 unknown persons than if it originated from Michelle and 2 unknown persons. Therefore, there's uninformative support for this particular sample based on Michelle's DNA profile, so it doesn't really support one conclusion over the other. I believe in a later report, we did an additional analysis on this particular sample. And we were asked to consider an additional proposition, which included Victoria in both propositions. So one proposition was Fabian Gonzales, Michelle Martens, and 1 unknown person. And the other proposition was Victoria, and 2 unknown persons. The DNA profile obtained from the sample was approximately 110,000 times more probable if the sample originated from Fabian, Victoria, and 1 unknown person than if it originated from Victoria and 2 unknown persons. Therefore, this analysis provides very strong support for the proposition that Fabian is a contributor to this mixed DNA profile.
And then there was a possible blood stain on the bottom of that same towel, which I believe is 17.13223.02, also from January 2018 report.
Yes. The DNA profile obtained from that sample indicated a mixture of at least 2 individuals with at least 1 male contributor. Jessica Kelley was excluded as a contributor to that DNA profile. Victoria, Fabian, and Michelle cannot be ruled out as possible contributors to the mixed DNA profile. The DNA profile obtained from that sample is approximately 4.2 times more probable if the sample originated from 2 unknown persons than if it originated from Victoria and 1 unknown person. Therefore, there is uninformative support in regards to Victoria doesn't support one proposition over the other. The DNA profile from the sample is approximately 970 billion times more probable if the sample originated from 2 unknown persons than if it originated from Fabian Gonzales and 1 unknown person. Therefore, this analysis provides extremely strong support for the proposition that Fabian Gonzales is not a contributor to the mixed DNA profile. Lastly, the DNA profile obtained from the sample is approximately 8,000 or 8,000 times more probable if the sample originated from 2 unknown persons than if it originated from Michelle and 1 unknown person. This analysis provides very strong support for the proposition that Michelle is not a contributor to this mixed DNA profile.
And then lastly, so we talked about 2 possible blood stains. There's 1 other sample avoiding possible blood stains. Tell us about that.
So for that particular sample, even though we attempted to avoid blood stains on or possible blood stains on the towel, we did blood test it using our presumptive test after collection, and blood was indicated on that sample. The DNA profile we obtained from that sample indicated 1 female contributor and matched the DNA profile obtained from Victoria Martens. Fabian, Michelle, and Jessica were all excluded as contributors to that DNA profile, and the chance that an unrelated person chosen at random from the general population would match the DNA profile is approximately 1 in every 2.1 septillion individuals.
You have a mic.
Stable past the witness.
Marjorie, do we need a break before cross? Does anyone need a break? Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, Judge. Before I pass the witness, one final thing. I apologize. May I first witness, Judge?
Mr. Video, I'm handing you what's been marked for identification as states 324. Do you recognize that?
I do.
How do you recognize that?
This is a copy of a chart that was created and summarized the DNA results that we obtained in this case.
And you've reviewed those results?
I have.
And those results are consistent with your testimony here today and your findings in this case?
Yes.
I move for admission of states 324, Your Honor.
No further objection.
324 will be admitted.
Thank you. I'll pass the witness now, Your Honor.
Were you Ms. Rentress the last time we spoke?
I may have been.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Now, how much money did the state of New Mexico pay for DNA laboratories?
I do not know that amount. I'm on the science side of the house, so we don't deal with any of the finances for our clients.
But it's been over $100,000, hasn't it?
I do not know. They may have been.
Okay. Now, if we look at the extract from the right-hand fingernail clippings, 17-10417-07, you obtained a number of male. What were your results from the right hand?
From that particular sample, we had a Y DNA profile indicating at least 1 male contributor, and it was inconclusive for comparison purposes.
Okay. Now, as to the faith-to-faith book, there is, and that's 17-1055-8.01 in your second report, there's extremely strong support that Jessica Kelley and Victoria Martens contributed to the mixture as opposed to 2 unknown individuals.
Correct.
And in fact, the odds are 310 decillion to 1.
The DNA profile obtained for the sample is approximately 310 decillion times more probable if the sample had originated from Victoria and Jessica than if it originated from 2 unknown, unrelated individuals.
Okay. Now, my understanding is the right hand swabs contained at least 2 males.
Can you please give me an item number for that?
I just have from your deposition, you said that on page 29, but I couldn't find the number.
The right-hand swabs, the wet and the dry swabs that we combined into a single sample for DNA analysis, we did obtain a mixture, a Y DNA mixture of at least 2 male individuals, and it was inconclusive. Okay,
so at least 2 males on her right hand.
Correct.
All right, let's look at her blanket, which was 10562.01.
Do you know which report that was in?
Oh, boy. I don't. 10562.01.
Okay.
Did you find it?
I did.
Great. Do you see at least 5 male individuals on this blanket?
That's correct. We indicated that blood was present on this sample and collected a sample from the unstained areas on the item. However, blood was still indicated on that sample. We did Y-DNA testing, and the sample indicated a mixture of at least 5 male individuals and was inconclusive for comparison purposes.
Now, as I understand it, it was 7,900 times more probable that the sample originated from people other than Fabian Gonzales. Is that true?
I don't know what you're referring to.
Just your deposition 31.8. I thought you had ruled him out.
From 17-10562.01?
Right, I may be incorrect because you're saying it's inconclusive. So did you run the probability analysis on that one?
Not on that item.
Okay. How about the 4 males on the red shirt? And I think the red shirt is D0292834. No, 10577.01 and .02.
Yes, for that sample, for the Y-DNA testing specifically that was conducted, it indicated a mixture of at least 4 male individuals and was also inconclusive for comparison purposes.
Now, maybe I'm wrong again, but didn't you exclude Fabian Gonzales as a contributor to the DNA on the red shirt?
You're referring to the testing from the first report. That was the autosomal DNA testing, I believe. For that particular sample, the DNA profile indicated 1 female contributor and matched the DNA profile from Victoria Martens. That was an autosomal DNA profile, so we were able to make comparisons, and Fabian, Michelle, and Jessica Kelley were excluded.
Okay.
The second analysis that you are referring to was the Y-DNA testing. And that's where we mentioned before the reason why we do that Y-DNA testing is to eliminate anyone who could be overwhelming the sample. So someone who, if there's blood, it could be the blood donor. So that was the purpose, is that we saw male DNA, but when we tested in autosomal DNA, using an autosomal DNA kit, we only detected the DNA from Victoria Martens.
All right, so in the autosomal, which is, we're looking at human DNA, both male and female DNA, you certainly saw Victoria's DNA, but you also excluded Fabian's DNA.
Correct, from that DNA profile, that's correct.
And then when you went to the YSTR, which only looks at male DNA, you found DNA from 4 males on the red shirt.
At least.
At least 4. Now, I guess we should go through some of these others from this 324, which is that DNA results.
Mm-hmm.
To quickly go through the first page, there's 2 knives, and yes, is it 1 knife and you test it on 2 sides because it's got a .02 and a .01. And I think Exhibit 323 is that knife. Oh, I get it now. .01 is just the blade, and .02 is the entire handle. Is that right? We're looking at 70.105, 77.02, or the first page of this exhibit.
.01 was a knife with a silver blade labeled 1834F. .02 was a knife with a silver blade labeled 1834A.
Okay. So I guess I'm a little confused. Which knife is 323?
That knife, I don't know what 323 refers to.
Yeah, that's the exhibit number
For this photograph.
for this photograph.
Okay. This knife is 17-10577.01, 1834F. You can see by the date here, the screener screened it on October 12th, 2017, and the first report only references this knife. A second knife was screened at a later date, so we know that this was 1834F.
So there are 2 knives.
There are 2 knives,
Okay.
yes.
Now this knife, we excluded Fabian. We're referring to 323 or .01, 1834F. Fabian was excluded.
For the first sample that we collected, yes, Fabian was excluded from the DNA profile on the blade of the knife.
Okay.
An additional sample was collected from the entire handle area, and that DNA profile was inconclusive for comparison purposes.
Now, the 1834A, I guess, is a different knife, but he was also excluded from that knife as well, wasn't he?
Correct. He was excluded from the sample that we collected from the handle of that knife.
Okay. White cloth hand towel coffee print pattern, which is 13223.01. That is the one item, I think, where Fabian appears to be a contributor to the mixture. Is that right?
There was very strong support for the proposition that he is a mixture, or is a contributor, excuse me, to the mixture.
Right. Now, you found a blood stain as well, but it's not Fabian, it's not Michelle, and it doesn't appear to be Victoria either. Isn't that true?
The results, if you're referring to the blood stain on the bottom,
right.
The results were uninformative for Victoria, so neither proposition was supported, and there was extremely strong, the analysis provided extremely strong support for the proposition that Fabian is not a contributor, and very strong support for the proposition that Michelle is not a contributor.
So we don't know who this blood belongs to, or whether this rag, white cloth hand towel, what its relationship is. We can't identify whose blood it had to do with.
I didn't have any further items to compare, or standards to compare, so.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And then the next item on this exhibit looks like white hand towel excluded Fabian. Now it has a lot of the same numbers except it's a .03. So what's the difference between this white hand towel and the other two?
All of these samples were collected from the same towel.
Okay.
The three different numbers refer to where on the sample, or where on the towel the item was sampled. So .01 refers to a possible blood stain on the top of the towel. .02 refers to a possible blood stain on the bottom of the towel. And then .03 refers to the top and the bottom of the towel that was sampled, avoiding possible blood stains. But all three came from the same towel.
Understood. And as to 3, which is the whole towel not looking at the blood, you excluded Fabian.
Yes, we did exclude Fabian from that DNA sample. We did, when we tested that sample that was collected, we did indicate there was blood present, even though we tried to avoid it.
Okay. And you found hand wipes in Victoria's room, 2 individuals, but inconclusive, no comparisons. And that's 10417.19.
That's referring to the extract that we received from New Mexico. For that, we did obtain a mixture of at least 2 individuals with at least 1 male, and it was inconclusive.
And it's 10555.01, the next in the line. Once again, very strong support that Fabian was not a contributor to the mixture. Is that right?
Which item is that?
It would be M8 is one way to look at it, 17.10555.01.
Fabian was excluded from the sample from the entire yellow strap from that item. That was the hand wipes container. For the exterior top lid, there was, the analysis provided very strong support for the proposition that Fabian Gonzales is not a contributor.
Okay. So you can't exclude him, but it's very strong evidence that it was not him.
Correct.
Okay. The hand wipes swab, I guess it's the same hand wipes, but a different area. And you're not actually receiving these physical objects. You're receiving a test tube that has dry DNA inside of it.
For the results you and I were just discussing, that was from the physical hand wipes container.
Okay. Some of these came as a test tube and others came as the physical object.
Yes, that is correct.
Thank you. So looking at another part of the hand wipes, once again, he was excluded as one of the male contributor or the 3 total, at least 3, that had touched the hand wipes or had left DNA on the hand wipes.
If you're referring to the entire yellow straps, yes, he was excluded from that DNA profile.
Okay. And we have at least 1 male, but we don't know, we don't have any profiles that would suggest who it is. We just know it's not Fabian.
Correct.
It's a male. Okay. I guess, is 10559 a different right-hand swab, wet and dry? Oh, this is OMI, so we're now looking at the body of Victoria, this last page. Is that, I guess you don't have this exhibit in front of you, do you?
I don't.
Okay, let's move to the extracts from the child, and I guess the first thing I want to do is show you what's my next door number. Is it N as in November? If I can hand you what's been marked as Exhibit N, do you recognize that?
Yes, I do.
And you talked about this during the direct, that you quantify how much DNA you have on various items before you sort of make a strategy of what test to go through for that item.
Yes, that's correct.
And this document here is a worksheet that helps to quantify the amount of DNA that is present, both human and male.
Yes.
And while I'm at it, let's do both of these. If I can show you Exhibit O. This is another, oh no, I'm giving you the wrong one. I should come to that. There's another one here, I think. Yeah, here it is. I'm going to make this O. This is another quantification table.
Thank you.
So these two quantification tables, N and O, they tell us how much human and male are on various items that you're looking at. Is that correct?
They say how much is in the extract.
In the extract that you're looking at. So all of the OMI, Office of the Medical Investigator, all of the DNA that you're looking at that were swabbed from Victoria's body, all of those were in tubes, and you had to resuspend them, get them to be liquid again, and then the first thing we did is see, well, how much DNA do we have in these tubes?
Correct.
All right. And I would move N and O into evidence.
No objection. Defendants N and O will be admitted.
Okay. Let me steal those from you, if I may publish, Your Honor.
You may.
So these are some of the quantifications as far as how much DNA that you have in these various items here. And some of them that we're going to look at in a minute is, there were, I believe, 10417. Those items are fingernail clippings, aren't they?
Yes, they were labeled as extract from right-hand fingernail clipping.
All right, and as we see these numbers, the human, and that means male plus female, for example, 10417.08 or 07 is a good one, you have 7.96 nanograms of human.
Yes.
And you have 0.0011 nanograms of male.
Yes, and I should mention those values are per microliter too.
Therefore what?
Per microliter?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're trying to come up with, I guess, a solid in a liquid. Is that how it is? Or a liquid in a liquid? You're going with a weight to the amount of liquid.
I guess you could say it that way. Basically, we're just trying to figure out, these numbers just represent how many nanograms are in each microliter of the extract. So depending on how much, or how many, microliters are in there, you will potentially have to multiply this value times that number.
Now, so we get a little idea. If a gram were a little tincture of salt,
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you've done this before, probably. Is that a good analogy, as a gram is a little bit of salt?
Some people use that analogy.
Okay. A nanogram, as I understand it, is 1/100000th of a gram.
Yes.
Okay. And when we're looking at the male, we're down to picograms there because it's 0.001. Is that right?
0.001 would be, yes, a picogram. Mhm.
So it's like 1 times the power of 12, I guess. So that's, if a nanogram is a billion, then these numbers are in the 1 trillion.
Correct.
All right. What I'm trying to get at is there's 7,236 times more female than there, well, yes, more female, because you could subtract that from here to get just the female, but 7,000 times more female than male DNA on these fingernail clippings.
Correct, and that's what we discussed earlier, how when you have DNA that comes from the body, that can overwhelm, or that can be so much more than any other DNA that is on the body.
But it's also possible that there's 2 females on the fingernail clippings, not just the victim. There could be a second female, couldn't there?
Correct.
And so we're looking for something that is, 1/7000th of the DNA when we start going into our YSTR.
Yes.
And the same would hold true showing you Exhibit O. We're going to look at these 2. These are the swabs from the lower back, aren't they?
Yes, the bottom 2 numbers are swabs. Or yes, the bottom 2 are from the lower back, and the first number is from the mid back.
Okay. And if we look at the mid back, about 27 times more female than male DNA on the mid back.
I have not done that calculation, but yes, there is more human DNA than male DNA.
Okay. In such small quantities in terms of the male DNA, in all likelihood, we have a secondary transfer here, don't we?
We don't have a statistical way to determine right now whether a secondary transfer could have occurred.
Well, if I were to bring a cup of coffee to you, and you picked it up, it's possible that, well, let's say I shake your hand and then you grab a cup of coffee. My DNA could be on the cup even though I never touched it.
Yes, that's something that is possible.
So it's a little like a virus, that it can get spread around from one object to another. That's what we mean by secondary transfer, isn't it?
Yes.
And the same, 6th on the blanket could be, we can't compare them statistically, but that could be how we ended up with DNA on the small of her back. Isn't that true?
Do you mean the mixture of at least 5 male individuals
5.
on the blanket?
Yeah, the 5 on the blanket, we're going to see how many we found on her back, but it's possible that this amount of DNA in the, I've forgotten, picograms, that it could have been transferred from something else like that blanket or a park bench or in the playground, or there's a lot of different ways you can transfer DNA on there.
Yes, secondary transfer is possible. For the 2 profiles that I obtained, or the profile from the blanket and the back, those were all inconclusive profiles. So I wouldn't be able to do any comparisons to each other with
Right.
those mixtures. But yes, secondary transfer could be a possibility.
Okay. Now let's go to these other 2, which would be P and Q.
I can read a one of the yours and take a break.
Let's
You
do
okay
it.
at this point, Mr.
Great.
Ernst? Okay, let's go ahead and take a break. We'll give you 10 minutes, all right? And George, you may go ahead and step out.
Are those the electropherograms of 1781.01 and .02?
They're one page of the electropherogram. There is a second page for both of these, but is not here.
Okay. So we're just looking at the first half or so of the DNA printout, if you will.
Okay?
Do you agree with that?
For 81.01, that would be the second page of the electropharogram. And for 81.02, that is the first half of the electropharogram.
Okay. I'd move P and Q into evidence.
No further objection.
P and Q will be admitted.
So, as I understand it, now these are the same two, they come from the lower back swabs, is that right?
These were extracts from the lower back.
Right. And I think these are the same two that we looked at yesterday from the state lab. StarMix is more sensitive than the testing, may be more sensitive than the testing that the state lab did. Is that your opinion, or?
StarMix doesn't apply to these samples. These are YSTR profiles.
Okay.
So StarMix helps to resolve complex mixtures, but it is not used for YSTR profiles.
This is the PowerPlex.
This is PowerPlex Y23, which is more sensitive, is one of the most sensitive YSTR kits that's available right now.
It's state of the art, isn't it?
It's one of the newer kits.
Now, if your findings are different, that doesn't mean that what the state lab did was wrong or invalid. It just means you have a more sensitive test. Would you agree with that?
I would.
And I wanted to look, if I may publish, Judge, I wanted to look at just one of the what do you call those, spikes, or?
They're called alleles.
They're alleles, and then when it jumps up, that's a spike that has a data. You're picking up DNA data when it spikes up.
That's correct.
All right, and so on this, we're looking at the 01, and we're looking sort of towards the end of the DNA, what comes out of the machine from the DNA strand. Is that correct?
We are looking at the data that comes out of the genetic analyzer, yes, the DNA profile that's generated.
Now, what we see here is 4 spikes that came from that particular allele.
I would say 4 alleles that came from that particular location.
Okay, good. Thank you. Now, there's 2 that are about the same strength because, well, first we have four numbers. That's why we say there's 4 males that contributed to this mixture, because we're seeing 4 here, and there's 4 over there, and probably on the first page we're seeing some 4s as well. That's why you're saying there's at least 4 males that contributed to this mixture. That's your conclusion, right?
That is.
All right. And then if we look at this one particular, we have the number 11, the number 14, the number 15, and the number 16. Those are the 4 numbers that have DNA that give us a spike. Is that right?
Yes, those are the 4 alleles.
Okay. And then the second number, as I thought, and I might be wrong, is that the strength, the quantification of DNA that you're seeing?
You could call it that. We call it relative fluorescent units. Basically, it's how tall that peak is.
Okay. And then what's the third number? Does that quantify anything?
That's the size. So it indicates where in the DNA profile it is. You'll notice as you go from left to right on the electropharogram, the size will be bigger. So towards the left, you see 125.92, and then the next peak is 182.58. So it's the size. It's where on the x-axis, essentially, it is.
Okay, so that's your x-axis is left to right. And so the y-axis is how high up it goes.
That's correct.
Okay. The first 2 go up almost the same amount, 199 and 198. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
So is that like 2 majors, or how would you call those 2?
I deemed this profile inconclusive for
Okay, so
comparison purposes.
that's one thing you can't describe, because we don't have enough, if we back out here, even on this page, and I'm sure the other page will look like it, we're missing, a lot dropped out, didn't it?
It did.
So there's 2 problems why you can't really try to compare this with another electropharogram. First, we're missing a lot of alleles, right?
Correct.
And the other is because we've got a mixture. We've got 4 people. We don't know if this person left this one, or maybe this one left this. We don't know who's leaving which items of DNA. We can't marry one of the four to each one. Would you agree with that?
I would.
But your conclusion is, which we've already said, is that there are four. There's four people that contributed to this one.
I said at least 4.
At least 4.
Mhm.
And then on the other one, .02, your opinion is that there's at least 2 there.
That's correct.
All right. Now, how long does DNA stay on a person?
On a item,
Well, an item. It could be a person or a piece of cloth or a knife or anything.
there's no way to determine exactly when DNA is deposited on an item. We process cold cases from the 70s and 80s and are still able to get DNA. My previous employment was working for the Armed Forces DNA Identification Lab, identifying fallen soldiers. So that was from World War I, World War II, and we were still getting DNA back then. So you can't, DNA has no timestamp, I should say.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you. Redirect. Yes, sir.
There were some questions on cross about the amounts of DNA you got from the extracts from OMI. Its defense is N.
Yes.
And you were directed to look, I believe here, where we have 7.96 and .0011. So tell me what those numbers mean to you for that sample.
7.96 is the total amount of human DNA present. So that includes any female or male contributors that are in that DNA. .0011 just looks at the male DNA. So that's the total amount of male DNA that is in that sample. Could be from multiple males, we don't know, but it's just looking at the total. And those numbers are per microliter, like I mentioned before.
Does this tell you anything about if this is a mixture or anything like that, this one?
If we were to process it using autosomal DNA that looks at both male and female, I would expect a mixture because you see the high difference between the human and the male. That suggests that there could be a male in there and there could be a female in there. However, in this case, because the male is so low, we know that that human DNA could be overwhelming, so you may not see those males.
And this number, these are from OMI. These are from the extracts from her body. Do we know which one this is?
.07 was the extracts from the right hand fingernail clippings.
And have you seen photos of how Victoria's hands and arms were when she was found?
I do not recall.
If her hands and arms were saturated with her own blood, would that make sense to you looking at these numbers?
Yes, that could be an explanation.
So when you were asked if this means that maybe there's 2 females, it's also possible or even maybe probable that if someone's hands or fingernails are saturated in their own DNA that you could get a number just like that?
That could be possible.
And we've looked at this, we've heard that this is really low. These numbers only sort of even make sense to me. These are very low amounts. Are you still able to get, I'm seeing this male column, are we still able to get reliable results here?
Yes, it's possible. When we did our validation study for that PowerPlex My 23 kit, that's when we established those cutoffs like I talked about earlier. And anything below that cutoff, we would not forward for YSTR. So all of these we were able to forward for Y testing.
DNA in general is little, right?
Yeah.
So these numbers are sort of, is this a normal set of numbers? This isn't anything extreme?
It's about what our cutoff would be to use our kits.
We were asked about the knives. Let's take a look at 323, which is 1834F. You were asked if the defendant had been excluded from the blade. And there were actually sort of a series of questions about where he was excluded from. So when we say excluded, and this is from November 2017 report, 17-105-77.01. Did
Yeah.
you find the source for the DNA on that blade?
From the blade of the item, that DNA profile did match Victoria Martens.
So this wasn't a mixture where he was excluded from a mixture. Everybody but Victoria was excluded. Is that fair?
Correct. The other 3 individuals were all excluded.
So Jessica Kelley was excluded?
Yes.
And Michelle Martens was excluded?
Yes.
And on the handle, I believe that was the second sample from January 2018.
Yes.
You swabbed this Tell me where your second sample, and I believe you swabbed the handle?
Yes, the handle area.
And I believe you were asked if the defendant was excluded from the handle. Is that fair?
I can't say anything in regards to that, except for there was at least one male contributor, and it was inconclusive, so I was not able to do any comparisons.
Now, talking about the other knife, 1834A, which you analyzed in January 2018, you were also asked, fairly so, if the defendant was excluded from the swab of the entire handle. Who else did you exclude from the swab of the handle?
I was able to exclude Michelle Martens and Jessica Kelley.
Let's talk about the hand wipes container. You were also asked some questions about, I believe you're asked some questions about excluding the defendant or not finding the defendant. Let's talk about when you processed the extract. That was November of 2017. Did you find white DNA on that, out of that extract, I should say? I'm sorry, the extract would have been November of 2017. I apologize, those are two separate reports.
Yes, we did. We processed that for autosomal DNA, so the DNA kit that tests for both male and female. That was a mixture of at least 2 individuals with at least 1 male contributor and was inconclusive for comparison purposes.
And I'm going to just publish 324. Zoom in a little bit. These are the results from the hand wipes container. So looking at going to your January 2018 reports where you did the swab of the exterior lid, you were able in Star Mix to find strong support that Fabian was not a contributor. Who else was not a contributor with strong support?
There was very strong support for the proposition that Jessica Kelley was also not a contributor to the DNA profile.
And then looking at the yellow strap.
For this, Fabian and Michelle were excluded as contributors, and there was extremely strong support for the proposition that Jessica Kelley was not a contributor to the mixture.
Going back a little bit to these swabs from OMI, specifically to Victoria's hands and fingernails, did you run autosomal testing on those or just Y testing?
For the right hand swabs?
Yes.
For the right hand swabs, we only performed YSTR testing.
Is that because autosomal testing from New Mexico had already determined that Victoria was the source of the major profile?
Objection, leading.
Rephrase.
Is that because of results from New Mexico?
I believe so, but you would need to consult New Mexico for those results.
When you first consulted on this case and decisions were made, when would a decision be made to just run a Y and skip the autosomal testing on the front end?
Usually those decisions are made up front, especially with receiving extracts. Typically, the laboratory would have performed all of the DNA testing that their laboratory was able to. So at that point, you would be evaluating anything additional that that laboratory could not do.
Going to Victoria's jumper, I'm going to show you stage 40. This has already been admitted. Does that look like the jumper you remember?
Which report was that from?
I'm sorry, that is from November of 2017, and it is 17-10561.01, where you did the straps and then the bottom.
Yes, the jumper was described as blue with green polka dots and denim.
So this jumper, when we talked about it on direct, was an attached piece, correct?
I believe so.
So let me ask this question. Would it be easier to transfer DNA through clothing or directly onto someone's skin? To their skin, I mean. Is it easier, if DNA is found, let's just be clear, talking about her back. If DNA is found on her back, would it be easier for that DNA to be deposited directly to her skin or through her jumper?
I would expect it to be direct transfer to be easier.
Now, is it fair to say that the more contact you have with people, let's say throughout the day, let's say you're out, you're seeing relatives, you're talking to people, you're touching things, would you expect possibly to have some transfer on your hands?
It's a possibility.
And then we talked about secondary transfer. If I have DNA on my hands from being out, buying things at stores, seeing relatives, would it be easier for me to deposit DNA on someone's skin through their clothes or directly on their skin?
I would expect always direct contact to be more likely, but we really don't have like a statistic in place to support that hypothesis.
Let's talk about the knife a little bit, or knives in general a little bit more. We talked about this knife, 1834F, which is DNA Lab 10577. In a hypothetical, if someone was holding the handle of the knife and using it for a long time, so lots of pressure, let's say you're cutting something, would you expect DNA from their hand to be on that knife?
That's reasonable.
Would you expect a different result if the knife were cleaned?
Cleaning does destroy DNA, so it's possible that if someone handled an item and it was cleaned, it's possible you would not find their DNA.
Talking about the towel from the washer, which was 1713223, 0.01, 0.02, and 0.03 from January of 2018, and also October of 2021.
Yes.
I'll show you this page of 324. It might be a little small. On that first sample, which was the possible blood stain, on the top of the towel,
Yes.
we have very strong support that the defendant is a contributor to the mixture. And we have, was anyone excluded from this before you did Starmix?
Jessica Kelley was excluded as a contributor.
So was she even included in the propositions?
No, she was not.
Why not?
I was able to exclude her looking at the DNA types in the mixture and comparing them into her profile. I was able to exclude them on my own without using the software.
So you already know before you run Starmix, she's not in there.
Correct.
Looking at the second sample, was Jessica Kelley excluded again before you ran Starmix?
Yes, she was.
And then there were some questions about the blood on the towel, or your sample number 3. There was a question about if the defendant was excluded from sample .03. Whose blood was that?
The DNA profile from that sample matched Victoria Martens.
So we've excluded not only the defendant, but Michelle and Jessica Kelley.
Correct.
And then in the sample you ran, or the proposition, excuse me, that you reran in October of 2021, can you tell us one more time the conclusion from that proposition?
Yes, the DNA profile obtained from that sample is approximately 110,000 times more probable if the sample originated from Fabian, Victoria, and 1 unknown person than if it originated from Victoria and 2 unknown persons. This analysis provides very strong support for the proposition that Fabian is a contributor to the mixed DNA profile.
So there is blood, the sample that was blood indicated contains Victoria's profile, and presumably that's her blood, and then the defendant is found on that same item?
Yes, there was also extremely strong support for the proposition that Victoria was a contributor.
Do you have a moment?
We have no further questions, Your Honor, from this review.
All right, may she be excused?
She may.
All right, you may step down, thank you.
Thank you.
So instead of bringing in one witness for about 15 minutes, we're going to go ahead and take a lunch early, but before we do that, I just wanted to talk to the jury real quick. If you could turn off the live stream and the Zoom, please.